My name is Shelly Burkhart, and I'm the Accessible Ohio Specialist for the Northwest area of the state. Before becoming an Accessible Ohio Specialist, I was a vocational rehabilitation counselor. Presenting alongside me today is my colleague, Brianna. Would you like to introduce yourself and explain the accessibility features of today's webinar, Brianna?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna Potter, and I am the Northeast Accessible Ohio Specialist and an occupational therapist. We plan for accessibility from the start. We use the accessibility checker that's built into Microsoft 365 to review the resource guide and the PowerPoint. We address color contrast, font style and size, and add alternative text, known as alt text, to visual images. Also, in our delivery, we mention each other by name as the conversation goes back and forth to indicate who's speaking. This can be helpful when attendees are receiving this information through services like American Sign Language interpretation and live captioning. After the webinar, we edit the transcript and fix any captioning errors before uploading the webinar to our on-demand library. We also include a reasonable accommodation statement in our invitation to the webinar, so if attendees need accommodations, they know who to contact to ask. Taking these steps up front can make this presentation more accessible and inclusive for everyone. Shelly, can you give the attendees an overview of our webinar series?
Absolutely. The Accessible Ohio Playbook 6-part webinar series started with the fundamentals, which describe 3 main fundamentals to consider when designing and enhancing the accessibility and inclusion of all environments. These include the Accessible Ohio Priorities, the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as the ADA, and Universal Design. The Accessible Ohio Playbook webinar series continues with today's session on Accessible Ohio's first priority, planning and awareness. In this session, we will share information about the Accessible Ohio Initiative and how we can be a resource to Ohio's businesses, communities, venues, attractions, and employers through the services we offer. We will also provide an overview of the planning and awareness priority. We will then discuss ideas for accessibility features and universal design concepts related to planning and awareness. Throughout the webinar, we will demonstrate how Accessible Ohio can connect our partners with best practices for accessibility and inclusivity. The next 3 webinars in this series will each highlight one of Accessible Ohio's remaining priorities: navigation, experience, and personal care. They will provide an overview of the priority, give ideas for accessibility features and universal design concepts, and share how Accessible Ohio can be a resource. Our last session is called the Game Plan and will address how to establish and prioritize goals for accessibility and inclusion, and then create a plan for achieving these goals. Brianna, let's get things started with a brief overview of Accessible Ohio.
Sure. Accessible Ohio specialists partner with employers, businesses, communities, venues, and attractions to help identify barriers, establish goals for accessibility, connect them with resources for accessibility enhancements, and provide information about potential funding sources. Our team's mission is to prioritize accessibility from the start, promote inclusiveness, and ensure everyone can experience Ohio in an equitable way. We strive to move beyond the minimum guidelines of the ADA and focus on universal design, both of which are addressed throughout this webinar series. Accessible Ohio specialists provide consultations, education, and resources.
Brianna, because accessibility touches everything we do, we like to describe it as a journey we are all on. To help Accessible Ohio partners prioritize where to start and plan their next steps, we've organized accessibility into 3 main fundamentals. This begins with our Accessible Ohio priorities, which include planning and awareness, navigation, experience, and personal care. Then we continue with guidance from the ADA and, to a larger extent, the concepts included with universal design. The webinar focuses specifically on the first priority, planning and awareness, to create an environment that is accessible, inclusive, and welcoming to all. Let's kick things off by describing this priority.
Shelly, the planning and awareness priority relates to both how a business, venue, or attraction plans for making sure its offerings are accessible and the person with a disability planning a visit. So this starts with the organization understanding why accessibility matters and the ways it prioritizes and plans for accessibility and inclusion. In addition, planning and awareness can also include training your staff on topics like disability etiquette and awareness, how to handle requests for reasonable modifications, and how to have respectful interactions with employees, customers, and guests with disabilities. Another element of planning and awareness is being intentional about how your marketing materials are inclusive of all people, including people with disabilities. A great example of the planning and awareness priority is how we described the accessibility features of this webinar when we got started today. Planning and awareness also includes the steps a person with a disability may take when learning about the accessibility features a business or venue offers and planning on how they will use them. We will talk about these throughout this training in more detail, but here are some ways an organization can plan for accessibility. They can ensure their website is accessible, include an accessibility statement and an accessibility webpage, provide accessibility maps, and offer social narratives. But let's first start with why accessibility matters. Shelly, what's the business case for prioritizing accessibility?
Well, Brianna, accessibility and inclusivity can lead to positive impacts on organizations. Studies show that hiring individuals with disabilities and prioritizing workplace inclusion leads to higher revenues, more net income, and more profits. It's also important to note that according to the Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability Inclusion, or EARN for short, individuals with disabilities make up the third largest market segment in our country, and Americans with disabilities have a disposable income of $490 million. When a business creates products and services with accessibility in mind, it may help attract this valuable market segment and give the business a more comprehensive and diverse customer base. This is essential for the growth of the business. There are some advantages, though, that aren't as easy to measure. For instance, many people with disabilities have spent their lives learning to adapt to their environments. These experiences provide a natural means to developing problem-solving skills and creativity. So when an employer employs individuals with disabilities and cultivates an inclusive workplace, they may benefit from innovative thinking and creative problem-solving skills. This can transfer into ensuring products and services are accessible for their customers with disabilities. We have also learned that when we make things accessible, often everyone benefits. So think of services we all enjoy, like automatic doors when we enter grocery stores and voice recognition technology to send text messages. Plus, people with disabilities have friends and family who want to support businesses who are inclusive and take steps to make their products and services accessible, so employers may gain them as customers as well. Additionally, accessibility also helps create an inclusive brand image and shows the public that the entity values everyone. Brianna, do you have some suggestions on planning for accessibility?
Yes, I do. One great way is to prioritize accessibility from the start and ensure accessibility is part of the planning process. It is almost always easier, more effective, and less expensive to include accessibility in the beginning rather than making accessibility improvements after a project is complete. Prioritizing accessibility can also help prevent it from being an afterthought, which can lead to unintentional barriers. Taking this step may require involving leadership to make decisions about processes, so it can be helpful to raise awareness and gather support for accessibility from all levels of the organization. Another aspect of planning is to incorporate accessibility into the organization's procurement process. Businesses can consider accessibility when deciding what items to purchase for all employees or as reasonable accommodations, such as technology products like software and equipment. For accessibility projects and items that come with a cost, another best practice is to create a centralized budget for accessibility. This can be utilized for workplace accommodations and overall accessibility for aspects of the business. A centralized budget can help to streamline the process for purchasing and implementing solutions, making it more efficient. Another planning best practice I'd like to share is providing disability etiquette and awareness training to staff. This type of training can help to foster respectful interactions with all people, including people with disabilities. It can apply to both the workplace and interacting with customers. Shelly, let's get the audience thinking about disability etiquette and awareness by asking some questions.
That sounds like a great idea. A question will be displayed on your screen. Please choose the answer you think best answers the question. The first question is, how many people living in the United States identify as having a disability? Your choices are 100 million, 44 million, 3 million, or 36 million. We have different answers coming in, Brianna, and it looks like most of the audience thinks that 44 million people living in the United States have a disability. Brianna, what is the correct answer?
That is correct. So, according to the American Community Survey in 2022, approximately 44 million Americans reported having a disability. So, environments can be designed in a way that either limits an individual's participation in activities, events, and employment, or enables it. Becoming aware of the impact the environment, products, communications, and marketing have on all people, including people with disabilities, can guide organizations to plan for accessibility from the start and create inclusive environments. Shelly, what's our next question?
Well, Brianna, some people have an invisible disability, which means the disability, symptoms, and limitations are not readily apparent based on appearance. Please enter examples of invisible disabilities into the chat.
Let's see here. While we're waiting for some responses to come in, I can offer a few. And some are popping up right now. We have dyslexia, mental health issues, autism, fibromyalgia, diabetes. Let's see. Genetic diseases, ADHD, heart failure, heart issues, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, again, anxiety and depression, blindness, hearing disabilities, chronic pain disorders, neurological disorders. Thank you all for your examples.
That was great audience participation, Brianna, and those were great examples. Most disabilities are not visible or apparent to other people. This means you may not know a person has a disability unless they've disclosed this to you. And as we saw through your responses, they're wonderful responses, the list goes on and on. Invisible disabilities include a variety of types of conditions ranging from physical to mental health, intellectual, sensory, or neurological in nature. So it's not just one kind of condition. Because these disabilities are invisible, they may be less understood, which can lead to myths and stereotypes. People with invisible disabilities can be accused of faking or exaggerating their conditions. A common example of this is a person who uses an accessible parking space, but is not using a mobility device such as a cane or wheelchair. This person may face accusatory stares or comments from strangers who don't realize they have a medical condition that limits their endurance or causes walking difficulties. This is why training on disability etiquette and awareness is so important. It reminds us of the golden rule to treat everyone including people with disabilities, as you would want to be treated, and avoid patronizing, condescending, or making decisions for them. Brianna, could you share other ways to improve inclusive interactions through training?
I'd be happy to. It's a best practice to train staff on how to foster inclusive interactions with customers and community members with disabilities. This training can include information on general disability etiquette and awareness, how to create an inclusive environment, how to plan for accessibility, how to provide reasonable modifications, and how to identify and use the accessibility features of a venue. One topic that can be included in staff training is proper etiquette when interacting with people using assistive aids, such as service animals or mobility canes in public spaces. It's helpful to train staff not to pet or praise a service animal, call its name, or offer food or treats. A service animal is working, and these activities can be distracting and potentially dangerous. It is also important to not automatically assume a person with a disability needs help. It's better to simply ask. Assistive aids such as wheelchairs, scooters, communication boards, and mobility canes should be viewed as an extension of the person using them, so don't move or grab them without their permission. Here's an example of what not to do. Let's say you notice a blind person using a mobility cane in your tour group. Don't just take their arm and pull them in the direction of the next exhibit. Instead, ask, would you like some help getting to the next exhibit? Also, training staff on the accessibility features your venue has in place, where to find them, and how to use them can demonstrate your commitment to a culture of accessibility and inclusivity. The Accessible Ohio team offers an in-person presentation on disability etiquette and awareness focused on how to have respectful interactions with people with disabilities who may be visiting your venue. Reach out to us if you'd like to learn more. Shelly, let's wrap up why planning for accessibility matters. Can you share the real-life story adapted from a blog post on the Changing Spaces Ohio website?
Sure, Brianna. This story is about the experience Sarah and her son had while traveling home from a vacation. When their plane landed, they needed to locate the accessible family restroom with a universal changing station so Sarah could assist with her son's personal care. Sarah asked airport employees where she could find the restroom with the universal changing table. The employees looked confused, told her they did not have that, and directed her to a family bathroom with a baby changing table, which didn't meet the family's needs. A few weeks later, Sarah was on social media when she saw a post of a powered, height-adjustable universal changing table in the exact airport she had just visited. This story illustrates the importance of training staff on the accessibility features a venue has and on how to interact with visitors who are inquiring about these features. Had the staff been aware of the universal changing table, Sarah and her son could have been directed to the accessible family restroom that included what they needed. I think this is a good time to open it up to questions the audience may have. Julie Wood, the Accessible Ohio manager, will be joining us for the question and answer portions of this webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, please enter it into the chat or raise your virtual hand. Also, we did receive some pre-submitted questions during the registration process for today's webinar. Julie, while we are waiting for questions in the chat, will you share a pre-submitted question with us?
Absolutely, Shelly. Hi, everybody. While you're thinking of your questions, I will share one of the questions we received in advance, and it is asking, where can I obtain training for my staff on accessibility and inclusion?
This is Brianna, and Julie, I can answer that one. So Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities has an on-demand library that hosts a variety of webinars on disability inclusion. So this actually includes a 30-minute and a 60-minute version of disability etiquette and awareness training, and it's available to watch at any time. You are also welcome to contact the Accessible Ohio specialist in your area to schedule an in-person personalized training on this topic. You can do that by emailing our general Accessible Ohio email, which is accessibleohio@ood.ohio.gov, or you can find our individual contact information by selecting the team option on the Accessible Ohio webpage.
Thank you, Brianna. I would just like to add to that for the disability etiquette and awareness training or any of the trainings that we have in our on-demand library. What some of our partners have done is opted to host a live Q&A or questions and answers session after their team has viewed the content. So we can join you in person or virtually to host that. It can be helpful to take the content of the webinar and apply it to your unique setting. So that is an option for all of the trainings that are in the library. I am not seeing any hands raised or any questions in the chat, so let me ask another pre-submitted question. The next one is asking, my organization is really interested in being as accessible and inclusive as possible, but we're not sure where to start. It's all a little overwhelming. Are there any resources that you could suggest or direct me to help get started?
This is Shelly. Thank you, Julie, for the question, and I will try to answer this one. First of all, as we said earlier, we understand that everybody is sort of on a journey towards working towards accessibility, and we think it's great that you're on this journey with us, and there are resources to help. These resources include the Accessible Ohio Playbook webinar series. As a reminder, that series includes the fundamentals, the 4 priorities of Accessible Ohio, and lastly, the game plan. Information about different aspects of accessibility are also available in the resources on the Accessible Ohio webpage.
Yeah, Shelly, those are great resources. And this is Brianna. I just want to remind everyone they can also contact the Accessible Ohio specialist from your area for a consultation. And during that consultation, we can have a conversation with you to better understand your goals and help you prioritize where to start.
Thank you both. We do have a question coming in from the chat. It's from Crystal. She's asking, is there an official list of what counts as a disability? For example, is there a list with the invisible and visible disabilities from the ADA or from your OOD organization? I think some people only consider visible disabilities instead of some of the invisible ones listed above. Great question.
Yeah, Julie, I can take this one. Thanks, Crystal, for your question. The ADA does provide guidance on what qualifies as a covered disability. We can provide that guidance for you, but as you said, a disability can range from invisible disabilities and visible disabilities. So we should really look at that guidance and determine it on a case-by-case basis. Julie, do you have anything to add to that one?
Sure. So this is a common question, and the ADA does not have a list of diagnoses, disabilities, or conditions that automatically qualify as a disability. Instead, they define disability as a physical or mental impairment that significantly or substantially limits a major life activity. And so it's always determined on a case-by-case basis. And as Brianna mentioned, there's some guidance surrounding this. So through a consultation, we would be happy to connect you with that information. So thank you for asking that question.
Thank you for correcting me there, Julie. I meant the definition of a disability, not an actual list. So thank you for catching that. I appreciate it.
We do have another question coming in. Do you offer direct advocacy services for your consumers and clients? For example, if a person needs a modification to their utility service and the city is not complying and advocacy is needed.
Julie, this is Shelly, and I will address this question. Accessible Ohio does not police the ADA and doesn't take that kind of approach. We try to partner with communities, attractions, employers across the state of Ohio to help them on their journey towards accessibility. So that's not part of what we do, but we can offer many services to help those partners along this journey. Julie, is there anything you'd like to add for that?
Thank you, Shelly. You answered it well. We would like to say we're not an enforcement agent. We're not a compliance agency. We are here to partner with those entities that do have accessibility and inclusion goals and connect them with the resources that help them take those next steps. So thank you for asking so we could better clarify the Accessible Ohio services that we offer. We are getting another question that's asking, is there guidance on what is considered a daily life activity? So as we mentioned in the definition, it's defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. There's a variety of these.
Yes, Julia, you're right. There is a variety of these, like walking, communicating, eating, and much more, that the ADA does provide some guidance on that as well. And we'd be happy to connect you with that specific definition and the different examples of daily life activities.
Thank you. You're right. There are many. Taking care of yourself, working, lifting, reaching. There's a long list. So yes, we can connect you with that information. And it looks like that's the last of the questions we have for now. So we will have another break towards the end. So I'll turn it back to you guys to continue with the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks for the great questions, everyone. We really appreciate it. So we've spent the first part of the webinar discussing why accessibility matters and sharing ways organizations can prioritize and plan for accessibility. Now we're going to shift to discussing how organizations can ensure the information they're providing is accessible for people planning their visit to the venue or the attraction. This includes making sure the website is accessible, organizing an accessibility page on the website, providing an accessibility map, and creating social narratives. Brianna, let's start with making the website accessible.
Sure. So now more than ever, we can take care of all kinds of things online. So for instance, you can apply for an absentee ballot, file a police report or tax documents, register for school, place orders, look up information, apply for a job, plan a visit to a venue, and lots more. It has become a central part of daily life for many people. The Department of Justice, known as the DOJ, provides a resource titled Guidance on Web Accessibility and the ADA, and this resource provides information on how state and local governments and businesses open to the public are required to make their websites accessible. Resources for technical standards for website accessibility include the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, known as WCAG. A website that is fully accessible allows all people equal access to the programs, activities, and services offered, and provides an opportunity to plan for them. Shelly, would you describe features to include in an accessible website?
Sure. Let's start by discussing how website accessibility affects an online shopper with color blindness. Graham has a color vision deficiency and cannot distinguish the colors red and green. He has a limitation with identifying colors on websites. This has led Graham to experiencing barriers when shopping online, especially when websites and apps do not use adequate color contrast or where color alone is used to identify information. This story reminds us how important it is to use color effectively on a website. It's essential to consider proper color contrast and avoid relying on color cues alone to communicate or organize information. This slide demonstrates the differences in poor contrast versus good contrast. The first statement says poor contrast in light gray lettering on a white background. Those with a visual disability may have a limitation when reading the statement or may miss important information altogether. The second statement says good contrast in white print on a black background. This small, thoughtful change results in proper color contrast and makes the text much easier to read. To demonstrate color cues, there are 4 rectangles on the slide. On the left, the red and green rectangles are not labeled with the name of the color. If the instructions indicate it, click the green box. A person with red and green color blindness may have difficulty identifying which box is green. On the right, the rectangles are labeled. adding labels with the name of the color provides the user with the information needed to make the selection. Following these steps for color contrast and color cues makes shopping online a better experience for Graham. Brianna, do we have another scenario to share?
We do. So let's discuss a story about a person with limitations using a typical keyboard and mouse. Drew has worked in data entry for many years, and she's developed a repetitive strain injury, which makes it painful to use a mouse and keyboard for any prolonged period of time. Various modifications allow Drew to use her computer to work with less pain. These include using an ergonomic keyboard, using keyboard commands instead of a mouse, using voice recognition software, and assistive technology on her computer and phone. Drew encounters barriers when websites and other online content can't be navigated by keyboard commands only. Often, she has difficulty with web forms that don't have keyboard equivalents. It's also tiring for her when it's hard to skip the content and navigate to certain areas on a web page without the use of many keyboard commands. Drew is exploring assistive touch on her mobile phone to help her use fewer gestures, which enables her to use it longer. This story reminds us how important it is to design websites and forms for keyboard navigation, making sure they can be navigated without using a mouse. It also reminds us to ensure documents and forms are accessible and to test for the interoperability of assistive and accessible technologies and the website. Shelly, these stories highlight the importance of making websites accessible. Could you share some additional suggestions on website accessibility?
Sure, Brianna. There are 4 principles of accessibility to keep in mind when developing a website. First, the content should be perceivable or recognizable to the user. Second, it should be operable or usable. Third, it should have a clear and simple language so it is understandable. And fourth, the site also needs to be robust so a wide variety of users can access it with different assistive technology. Some best practices to follow include designing the website and website forms for keyboard navigation, using plain language for written information, testing for the interoperability of assistive and accessible technologies on the website, including alternative text for visual content, and embedding web links in descriptive language. Check out the resources section on the Accessible Ohio webpage for more information as we update our resources frequently. A website that is not accessible can exclude people just as much as an architectural barrier in a physical location. An accessible website means everyone can utilize web-based services and access information effectively and equitably. Accessibility improves usability for everyone and can increase traffic to websites, attract more customers, and improve brand recognition. Now let's take a moment for you to share your ideas. Think of a time when you were planning to go somewhere. Maybe it was a theater, a hiking trail, an airport, a restaurant, or even a group fitness class, and you visited their website before going. Using the chat, please share some of the features someone might look for to help plan their visit.
Shelly, I have a personal experience I can share while we're waiting for some responses in the chat here. So when my grandfather and I go to places that require a lot of walking, it's helpful to know where benches are located throughout that space to make sure he has a place to rest if he needs to.
Thank you for sharing that example, Brianna. And as you were sharing that, we have some examples coming in. One suggestion is bus stops. They're interested in bus stops, hours of operation, parking accessibility, level paths of travel and hard surfaced, accessible restrooms.
Temperature, heat or AC, yes, that's a good one. Accessible seating. Audio descriptions, if those are available.
These are all great ideas.
I agree.
Backup power source in case of a power outage. They look up information on lighting and because lights can be a trigger for seizures and anxiety. Good suggestion, awesome. How far, the distance to the destination. And an interior map on Google Maps for larger buildings.
Yeah, we have sensory rooms, sign language
Okay.
interpretation, elevators, sound volume.
Our audience has wonderful examples today, Brianna.
I agree.
Brianna, can you share another situation related to accessibility priority of planning and awareness?
Sure. So let's imagine what a family's experience could be like going to a fair. A family of 4 is going to an outdoor fair for the day. One of their children, Bella, has a developmental disability, which makes transitioning from task to task difficult. She can also be overwhelmed by too much environmental stimuli. When they arrive at the fair, the family starts to walk through the fairgrounds to look at the animals, rides, and food. Within an hour, Bella starts to show signs of discomfort, covering her ears and displaying emotional and behavioral responses. Her parents are searching for her fidget toys they usually keep handy, but they must have forgotten them at home. The crowd is getting larger, a band starts playing music on the stage, the line to get food gets longer by the minute, all of which is causing Bella to be overwhelmed by the environment. This leads to the family leaving the fair early. Let's use this story to apply elements of planning and awareness that fair planners could implement to enable participation by Bella and her family. Shelly, do you have some ideas?
I do, Brianna. The fair planners could include an accessibility page on their website to share all their accessibility components of the digital and built environments in one location. Many of those examples that the audience provided earlier could be included. Many people will research the websites of the business, community, venue, or attraction before a visit. The fair planners could include contact information on their webpage for visitors to use if they encounter a barrier, have a question, or need to request a modification. They can also list the accessibility features, design elements, and features available at the fair. These features may include information on accessible parking, accessible family restrooms and universal changing stations, elevators, water fountains, the location-aware accessibility tools such as sensory bags can be obtained, and more. Listing the accessibility features of a venue on a web page enables a person to know they will have what they need to participate when planning a visit. These best practices incorporate the concepts of awareness and understanding from universal design. Brianna, another element we often mention is having an accessibility statement on the website. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. The fair planners could include an accessibility statement on their website to demonstrate their commitment to accessibility and inclusion. This statement communicates the accessibility components of an organization's website, applications, and/or digital content. Some best practices for an accessibility statement include providing information on the web accessibility standards used to create the digital platform, the steps taken to make the digital environment accessible, the organization's commitment to ensuring equal accessibility for everyone, and contact information for visitors to report accessibility barriers. Accessibility statements can be posted on the accessibility webpage, on webpage headers or footers, or in multiple locations. Another best practice is providing a map that displays the accessibility features listed on the webpage. Shelly, do you have more information on this?
I do. Accessibility maps highlight the location of an environment's accessibility components. These maps are tools that can help visitors plan their visit, as well as assist them in navigating the environment and locating features once they're there. To help a family understand where to find accessibility features and areas with high or low sensory input, the fair planners could produce an accessibility map. On the slide, there's an image displaying an accessibility map. This map highlights the location of adult changing stations, quiet rooms, wheelchair charging stations, and more. Some other components to highlight on an accessibility map include the location of elevators, accessible entrances and restrooms, areas that may be more crowded or noisy, hydration and food access areas, and sensory rooms. These maps can be posted on the accessibility webpage as a planning tool and also be available at the location for use at the venue. The map should be accessible and available in various formats, such as large print. This aligns with the universal design concept, perceptible information, which means information is being communicated regardless of ability.
Shelly, I would like to share one last best practice related to planning and awareness priority that can also be included on an accessibility webpage, and that's social narratives. A social narrative can prepare guests for what they may experience at an event and offer guidance on appropriate responses and behaviors. They consist of visual and written information about a new and/or potentially difficult situation. This simple and intuitive design, which is a universal design concept, considers the various ways we process information. We've included a simple mock-up of what this might look like on the slide with a photo of a Ferris wheel with a checklist below it. The fair planners could produce a social narrative with step-by-step pictures and descriptions of the process of buying a ticket to the fair, standing in lines for rides and attractions, and what to expect at a food vendor. Social narratives can benefit children, teenagers, adults, and individuals with neurodivergent disabilities by reducing anxiety and increasing understanding. They can be used to plan a visit to a venue and when they are at the venue. So it's helpful to post these on the accessibility webpage for viewing, downloading, and/or printing, and to have a printed version available at the venue. It's also possible to use an app to host social narratives.
Brianna, Accessible Ohio has consulted with venues that host outdoor events in creating an accessibility webpage that includes an accessibility statement, an accessibility map, and social narratives. Providing these resources helps individuals and families find what they need when planning to attend events like fairs and festivals. One partner created a comprehensive accessibility webpage for their event that listed all the accessibility features available for individuals to use. This included accessible parking, restrooms, service animal relief areas, interpretation services and assistive listening devices, accessible seating, sensory items and spaces, and wheelchair, stroller, and wagon rentals. It also included a statement displaying their commitment to accessibility and inclusion. They created an accessibility map with detailed information such as the location of drinking fountains, first aid, quiet zones, wheelchair and scooter charging stations, and more. Lastly, they created a social narrative to describe what an individual might experience when coming to the event. In particular, they described areas with large crowds and long lines so visitors could better plan their visit.
Shelly, let's think back to Bella's story and how simple adjustments could have had a positive impact on her and her family's visit to the fair. Prior to the trip, Bella's family visited the fair's website and reviewed the accessibility webpage. They learned about all the accessibility features the fair had to offer and had a chance to plan their day and utilize the features needed. Bella's parents noted the accessibility statement and felt a sense of inclusion and belonging prior to their arrival at the fair. By browsing the webpage, they learned about the fair's sensory-friendly hours when visual and audible stimuli are at a minimum and planned the day's activities accordingly. They also became aware of the dedicated spaces within the fairgrounds where Bella could take a break from the crowds or noisy environments to manage her sensory needs. The webpage also provided information on the sensory tools available to support Bella's self-regulation, such as noise-canceling headphones and fidgets. They even had the opportunity to print the accessibility map to locate these features at the fair. Providing these accessibility features can enable individuals and families to identify if they will have what they need to participate in an event. It also provides methods to identify how to obtain these enhancements and contact information for assistance in planning for what to expect. Taking these steps towards accessibility and inclusion can impact individuals and families, like Bella's, who with these supports are now able to stay and enjoy the fair all day. All right, I think this is a good time to stop for another question and answer session before wrapping up the webinar. Just as a reminder, you can use the chat or raise your virtual hand to ask a question. So Julie, while we're waiting for questions in the chat, can you share another pre-submitted question?
Sure, Brianna. Hi again, everyone. So another pre-submitted question that we received was asking if the Department of Justice has guidance on website accessibility that includes the ADA requirements for state and local governments and those businesses that are open to the public.
Thanks, Julie. This is Shelly, and I will address that question. First of all, we start with reminding everyone that website accessibility is a best practice. But of course, the Department of Justice actually does have guidance on website accessibility that includes the ADA requirements for state and local governments, as well as for businesses that are open to the public. The guidance tells us about why accessibility matters. It talks about providing examples of website barriers. It describes when the ADA requires web content to be accessible. So we have this information, but of course, all of it is very general. And so if you would like more individualized information, this is a topic we would be happy to discuss in more detail through a consultation. So you can reach your area Accessible Ohio specialist for that consultation.
Thank you, Shelly. And I'll just add the reminder that it's always a good idea to check the guidance, because while we can speak to what the general information is saying through the ADA, sometimes there's something unique about an entity where they might have responsibilities under both Title II and Title III. So it's always just a good idea to check that guidance in addition to the general information that we shared. And we do have some questions coming in from the chat. The first one from Crystal. Are there examples of the accessible map and a social narrative on your website that we could share with others? We are creating resources on the website, and that's being updated on a regular basis. And in the meantime, if you don't find what you're looking for, just reach out to us, because we do have examples of all of these accessibility features that we've talked about today that we could easily connect you with. So those are coming and being updated frequently. So thanks for asking, Crystal. The next question is from Rosemarie, asking, are websites using overlays fully accessible? So I'll get us started on this one. Overlays are not fully accessible. They can provide a level of accessibility. This is an example, like other things like artificial intelligence, where you really need to understand the tool that you're using and how to use it in an accessible way, and then check and test to see if it leaves any barriers to address those as well. Shelly or Brianna, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you covered anything. How about you, Shelly?
I don't have anything to add. I think it's something, to definitely look at further if there's questions.
Thank you both. The next question is asking, you mentioned consultation. So how do we schedule a consultation, and is there a cost? So I will start with saying you can reach out to anybody on the Accessible Ohio team. We can get you connected with the person in your area who will talk with you about your specific questions. On our website, we have a contact page where our general email box is listed in each of us. And then, Brianna, do you want to give the good news about the cost?
Yes, there is none. So yes, all of our resources are in-person presentations, the consultations, the resources on our website are all free. So that's great news.
Yes, and thank you, Kristen. Dropped the information in the chat, directing you to the team and mentioning again that there's no cost for the consultations. As we mentioned earlier in the webinar in the past, or in the last Q&A session, our intention with Accessible Ohio is to partner with businesses, communities, venues, and attractions to just join them on their accessibility journey and help them take that next step. So we really see these consultations as ongoing conversations to help support you with the resources and information that you need on that journey. Next question is not a question from our friend Monty. More of a vote of support for the accessible team. Julie, Brianna, and Shelly have been resources for my team, always quick to respond with knowledge and genuine enthusiasm. Well, thank you for that plug, Monty, and you are always a joy to work with. Pam says this service is great. Thank you, Pam. We think so too. We love what we get to wake up and do every day. Each environment is unique, and so the way that we can help is always a new approach or interesting for us. So we love that we get to do this. All right, so while we're waiting to see if a few more questions come in, we do have one more pre-submitted question. This is asking about a venue is saying that they have a social narrative, and is this something that we could add to the accessibility webpage? We addressed this in the webinar. Shelly, would you like to just kind of emphasize that one?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to, Julie. Thank you. A social narrative absolutely can be included on an accessibility webpage, and actually it's a really good place to locate one. A social narrative helps individuals plan their visit, and when you're creating that, consider including pictures and descriptions of social situations and activities and how things work to give people the knowledge they need to know what's going to be happening. These activities that you could look for and could include arriving and entering the location, letting people know how to identify the staff that you have there, knowing what to expect, such as, waiting in line, where to find specific features, how to get a ticket, how to deal with, how to find maybe even an area where there's food and hydration available. We would offer suggestions of other types of suggestions as far as like giving people information on other accessibility features, but letting them know what's happening or what may be happening at the location. And as Brianna mentioned earlier in the presentation, we've even seen examples where people have put their social narratives in an app, or they've incorporated it in an app so people can use it as they're going through the location itself.
Thank you, Shelly. I noticed that we had somebody drop a resource in the chat on why overlays are a Band-Aid and not considered best practice for website accessibility. So thank you for that resource that may highlight some of the pitfalls of using the overlay. And again, the reminder to know what you're using and to know how it can help and what barriers it might be leaving behind so you can continue to address those. So thank you for sharing that resource. And at this time, I don't see any hands raised. I don't see any additional questions in the comments or the chat, so I will turn it back to you two to conclude the webinar.
Thanks, Julie. We've really enjoyed sharing Accessible Ohio's first priority, planning and awareness, with you all today. To summarize, the planning and awareness priority has two main parts. It starts with the organization understanding why accessibility matters and the ways it prioritizes and plans for accessibility and inclusion. It also involves the steps a person with a disability may take when learning about the accessibility features a business or venue offers and planning how they will use them. Remember, our Accessible Ohio specialists are available to meet with businesses, employers, communities, venues, and attractions throughout Ohio. We will listen to your needs, provide resources, and engage in an ongoing partnership as we work toward our mission to empower everyone to experience all our great state has to offer in an equitable way. Please contact the Accessible Ohio specialists in your region to start a partnership with us. Our contact information is on our webpage, and a link is being provided in the chat area for your convenience. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and for your continued interest in our webinars.